For this week's video, I wanted to do a little bit of, I guess, my own take of an analysis, if it can really be called that, because it's going to be kind of more generalized than it's going to be, specific. But I thought I'd take a look at the differences and similarities between both the book and film adaptation of White Oleander. If you're unfamiliar with White Oleander, it's a novel by Janet Fitch. I think it was written in the late 90s, I want to say. I want to say 1999. And then the movie came out, I want to say 2002, but I'm not really that sure. So I thought I'd kind of take a little bit of a look at what was similar, what was different, what was good, what was bad, whatever. Something that's there's a few big changes that the movie made. I get that the book's pretty long. It's I want to say it was 600 to almost 700 pages. It was about at 600, I think. And I get that you can't maybe fit that all into a movie, especially if you don't want it to be super long or whatever. So if you're unfamiliar with the storyline, it's this girl whose mom, we pretty much figure out throughout the book and or movie that she's a narcissist, and she ends up killing her ex and ends up serving life in prison, and she's a single mom, and there's no one else that can take care of her, so she ends up in the foster care system. In the book, there's some changes, or there's some things that are different from the movie, such as I think the foster one she ended up at was Star, and then she ended up at the group home, and then I think she ended up at the one place where it was this one couple and a couple kids, and she had the one neighbor that she went to for a lot of things, and then it was the actress lady, and then it was that Russian lady, without giving, too much away of who's what or whatever if you've never read it. In between, I think the family where it's the couple and the children got taken out of the movie. It wasn't in there at all, which honestly, I don't think it was very... I can see why they took it out, and maybe not as necessary. Because I think the other ones being featured made more sense. So, the home she goes through, in the book, she goes to this woman named Star, who's a stripper, and her boyfriend Ray, and she's got 2 biological children, and then there's another foster child that she has. And so I think for Star particularly, they did a really good job casting her. Basically Star's character it's she's this born-again Christian, but at the same time she still dresses provocatively and does a lot of things that some people would not consider quote-unquote Christian. And for the casting of the boyfriend, I really did not like the casting of the boyfriend, because the boyfriend in the book, he is a Vietnam vet, and he's I think middle age, and he's basically this loser and whatever. But in the book, it's almost like he's a boy toy or something, because I think they're probably the same age, but honestly, he seems like he could be younger. And I really hate that they did that, because I feel like it was emphasized that Ray was a bit of a loser, so I don't know why we. I mean, you can still be a loser if you're not older or whatever, but like, it was kind of emphasized of him being middle aged and like, all he really had going, quote unquote, going for him was star. So I thought that was kind of dumb casting or whatever. But I guess if you're making a movie and there's people that haven't read the book, maybe. I don't know. And then the going to the I won't get into, just so it's not ruined details or whatever. I won't get into why she ended up in a different home, but she ended up in like a teen facility kind of a thing. And then I think in the book the next one was this couple with 2 young children that she ends up at. This is the part that's not in the movie. But basically the way she's treated there is, it's like they're only, for reference, I don't think I said this, she is a teenager, so she's like, I think 14, 15 when she gets in the system. And it's been quite a while since I read the book, so I don't know. So she ends up at the one house, and it's basically she's just treated like a maid, and the whole reasoning for having a foster child is just to have like a built-in babysitter for the little kids, built-in person to do all these chores and cook for the kids. Because, like, I think the kids were, like, pretty small, like maybe 4 or 5, like a boy and a girl. I think they're pretty little. But, eventually she ends up getting kicked out of there for, like, no reason. I think the foster mom just, like, didn't care or whatever. But, like, there was also this neighbor who, I forget, she was pretty mysterious. I think that was kind of purposeful. But she ended up kind of teaching her how to do, like if you want the finer things in life to go for it kind of a thing. Which also, I guess, that element might not have been in the movie, but I feel like the Russian lady kind of did something similar, so maybe it kind of is. Side note, I feel like the way they casted the main character's mom, oh my god, Michelle Pfeiffer did amazing for that role. She did really good. And so the next home she ends up in is this actress's home, and it ends up being pretty spot on for the book, honestly, for everything that ends up happening. And then something does end up happening with her, and so she does end up back at the teen facility place. And at one point, they were kind of trying to lean towards her being in more of an adoption situation, but at that point her spirits are just like, she just doesn't care anymore, unfortunately. Which, I mean, if I was in that position, could you blame her? And then the last home she ends up in is this Russian lady who, I think it was like a thing of almost like dumpster diving kind of a thing, but like getting high-end stuff and then like reselling it and making a lot of money off of it kind of a thing. I will say the one thing I liked about her, which I know she technically would have to start working for her when she would have turned 18, but it ends up being where she basically the Russian lady's like, well, you can stay on with me, excuse me, but you would have to pay room and board. Like, I wouldn't kick you out or whatever, but you would have to still like keep working. I will say I kind of like that she wasn't just automatically gonna throw her out, because I know that's a big issue in the foster care system, unfortunately. Like, some places just don't care and are like, well, you're 18 now, I don't have to, quote, deal with you, you know, which is sad. But she ends up, after the Russian lady, there's a boy she had met her first stint in the teen place, and they end up together, I think, in New York in the book, or not in the book, in the movie, but in the book they were technically in Berlin. But, yeah, there were some things that I think were not done so great, but a lot of the casting was done really well. I just really don't like how they did Ray for the movie adaptation, and they did end up leaving out the one foster home, which I do, like I said, I do get if you didn't read the book, maybe that might not be as important of a factor. But I feel like it kind of would have been important because I'm sure there's plenty of foster homes with young children, unfortunately, that would be like, well, you're our maid now kind of an attitude, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure they're out there. So that was my little analysis take on the book versus the movie when it comes to White Oleander.